Welcome into 247 Sports Live. I'm Emily Proud. If you are watching us on YouTube, make sure you hit the like button and make sure you are subscribed. We have 3 weeks until the NFL Draft in Detroit, and we are getting you ready for all the action with the latest CBS Sports mock draft from our friend Ryan Wilson. He joins the show today to explain his picks alongside our 247 Sports national college football analyst and member of our scouting team, Cooper Petagna. Ryan, I'll start with this. As we get closer to the real thing, this version is not your first draft, pun absolutely intended there. But what are you looking to adjust each time you create a new mock draft?
Emily Cooper, I'm happy to be here because it is Christmas time for me, basically, as we head down the stretch here. So in years past, and I was convinced that my bosses hated me. I used to do a mock draft every single week starting in the fall. Luckily, they dial that way back. So I've only done, since the start of college football, I'm on version 9 now. So what happens over the course of late August, early September to where we are now, and even looking ahead a few weeks, is early in the season, you're just getting a feel for these players, right? I mean, remember in mid-September, we were talking about Colorado and Shedeur Sanders and him potentially being a first-round pick. And then we saw the rise of Jaden Daniels as the college football season went on, and Michael Penix and all the things that he did for Washington. And those are the things you're trying to figure out as you watch these players, as you talk to scouts and NFL personnel. And now as we get down the stretch, so to speak, with the All-Star games behind us and the pro days behind us and the combine behind us, you're trying to sort out which teams like which players and what best fits what these teams are trying to do. So I think I have one more mock draft to go. Thankfully, they don't make me do the 7-round mock drafts anymore, which is also a nice break. But you're just trying to sort out who goes where. And Cooper, I'd be interested to hear what you think about this. It feels like this class, compared to previous classes in recent years, is incredibly deep at the top. So there could be 40, 45, 50 guys that feel like have a chance to be contributors early on. We know the quarterback's going to go high, and that's a conversation, of course. But I'm excited by the idea that there's so many players at different positions that can help fill needs in the first round for these NFL teams.
Coop, you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I apologize there. Yeah, no, certainly at the top of the board as well. When you think about some of the guys, Caleb Williams and the storylines, Jaden Daniels, obviously the Heisman winner, Drake May too. I think the other names, what is so interesting right now, especially a couple weeks before the draft, guys like J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix Jr., those are the guys right now. It seems like the stock more than ever continues to rise. Top 30 visits with NFL teams as they kind of batten down the hatches, get ready for decision day as the draft nears here in a couple of weeks. So it's fascinating to kind of see those storylines unravel. It seems like some teams are playing pickup or a little bit of catch up in the media as well on a couple of guys. So certainly some things to watch out for over the next couple of weeks, and can't wait to get into a couple of the guys at the top of the board.
Yes, real quick, before we get rolling, I did want to ask you, Coop. I mean, there's probably some people watching right now who are thinking, why is 247 Sports talking about an NFL mock draft? So explain just why is this process aligned with what you do scouting high school prospects?
Well, it's draft day for us. I mean, everything we do, we model after the NFL draft, right? There's 262 draft picks traditionally every year in the NFL draft. There's 247 players that we rank and we put inside the top 247, right? So when you think about that round for round, everything that we do models the NFL draft. There's 32 5-stars for a reason. That's because there's 32 first-round NFL draft choices. So for us, this is judgment day in a sense, 3 to 4, 5 years down the line, you're seeing how these 16, 17, 18-year-olds develop, guys that you see throughout the combine circuit, obviously that you evaluate throughout high school. And there are a lot of variables that you have to consider along the way as they develop throughout the collegiate game as well. So for us, it's a crapshoot. We know that. And looking at Ryan's mock draft, I mean, if you go through it, the 32 draft choices that he's projecting, you have 8 5-stars, you got 13 4-stars, you got 10 3-stars, and you got 1 unranked player. So what we're trying to do every year is kind of continue to minimize that 3-star rank, that unranked player, the guys who maybe slip through the cracks, maybe a Jared Verse or a Trevor Penning from years past, they slip through for a multitude of reasons. For us, that's an opportunity to continue to kind of refine our process, get better, and every year it kind of brings a new lesson to learn for us.
You know, fans love the players that come from nowhere. But for our scouting department, you're trying to find those guys early on. And now the NFL draft is to see all that hard work pay off 3 to 4 years later, depending on these careers. Let's waste no more time. Let's go ahead and show you the top 10 picks in Ryan's latest mock draft. It will not surprise you who is going at number 1, and that is one Caleb Williams to the Bears. Ryan, it seems like we can go ahead and start writing in Sharpie these days, but how sure a thing is Williams number 1?
I feel like Emily, there's a better chance that I will have a full head of hair 3 weeks from now than the Bears not taking Caleb Williams at this point. It's funny because in the fall, and Cooper makes an interesting point, right? Because there's a huge difference. I feel like what you guys do, you have the kids, you raise the kids, and you're sending them off to college, and then they're graduating and get the jobs. And when they come to us, in terms of the draft, they're getting their first real job. They buy their first suit, and it feels like sort of that progression. And I remember in the fall, there was some speculation whether Caleb would be quarterback 1. And I remember watching him midway through the college season thinking USC's offensive line is struggling. The defense might even be worse. Caleb is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And I couldn't quite wrap my brain around the idea that maybe Drake May might be QB1. But those conversations were being had by teams and certainly in the media. But I think what Caleb was able to accomplish last year, which was probably one of his toughest years as a football player, and his essentially dragging this offense up and down the field. And one of the pushbacks you got is that, well, he can't play in structure. It turns out he can play in structure. And if you look at the metrics, he does throw 3 seconds or less about 55% of the time last year, which was just slightly less than what Drake May did. Again, the offensive line was a huge issue, but some of these off-platform plays, the arm strength is there. Yes, he's only 6 feet tall, but he is very, very, very special, even when you're talking about professional athletes and the things they're capable of doing. And there are very few people on planet Earth that can do what he does. We had a chance to talk to him at the combine. And one of the things you want to see when you talk to him at the combine is what kind of person is he? How does he interact? And he was more humble than I expected him to be. He was very gracious and answered questions. And he said the toughest thing for him last year wasn't necessarily the Notre Dame game where he threw 3 interceptions in the first half. It was learning not to try to do too much. He said Lincoln Riley had to sit him down and say, listen, you have to live to play another down. You can't live and die with each play, because it was tearing him up inside. And we saw glimpses of that in terms of the emotion we saw from him. But I feel like the Bears would make a huge mistake by not taking him here. It's incredibly difficult to predict these quarterbacks, but Caleb feels like as close to a sure thing, fingers crossed, as you're going to see in this draft class at the quarterback position anyway.
Yeah, I think you said it. I mean, I think you said sure thing. When you evaluate the quarterbacks, I think you can talk yourself into Drake May. You can talk yourself into Jaden Daniels. But the one thing with Caleb Williams, I think he gives you the best combination of ceiling and floor. And I think you also brought up the great point. He had a lot on his shoulders. You're talking about the Heisman winner coming back. USC had to chase a lot of points. Only LSU gave up more points. USC was in that low 40 range in terms of giving up points defensively. So a lot put on his shoulders. And I agree, Ryan, from the standpoint of you're talking about a guy that gets this label of being like a creative magician because, well, most of the time he's outside of the pocket. He has to play off platform. I think that's kind of developed some habits that are correctable at the next level. But I'd love to fit in Chicago as well. They move on from Justin Fields. They clear the way for a guy like Caleb Williams. And you think about what they've done this offseason. You go out, you get Keenan Allen the year before, you get DJ Moore, you bring in a guy like Gerald Everett to pair with Cole Kmet. They've done a lot. They invested in the offensive line last year in Darnell Wright. And not to mention, you got the number 9 pick in the draft as well. So if there's some more firepower on the board, certainly a lot of receivers in that top 10 mix discussion. So out of all the notable number 1 picks that there has been in recent history, I actually think that Caleb Williams is going to be in a pretty good situation in Chicago if that does end up being the pick.
Yeah, it's always the tough part about when these quarterbacks get drafted early on is they're coming in to be the savior with not a whole lot going on around him. But as you're seeing Chicago, you'll see in this mock draft, they have a few more picks, a few more moves up their sleeve. Before we move on to the wide receiver talk, I know that you're itching to do that, Coop, but quarterbacks, obviously, most important position. And Ryan, you have them going 1, 2, 3. You got Jaden Daniels going to Washington and Drake May going to New England. So I'll put you on the spot here, Coop. Of those 3 guys, who has the best NFL career?
Well, I'm going to have to go with the number 1 draft choice, right? I mean, that's the guy that I feel the best about. I think, a lot of people, the consensus at the top is Caleb Williams, but I'll tell you this, the guy that I glance over today a little bit, and I kind of like this from a snapshot view, doing some homework, right? Being able to rush before the assignment. Drake May is the one guy I am so fascinated with. When you think about the prototypical quarterback, 6'4 plus, 225 pounds, you throw in the tape against Georgia Tech, and it's just an exhibition of NFL throw after NFL throw. Now, there's some things he's certainly going to have to tighten up, has a tendency to play some hero ball at times. But, I mean, you think about the physique, you think about the background. He comes from a family of athletes. He is a really, really interesting prospect. If you can get him in the right environment, get him coached up, I can see a big future for Drake May. So I'm going to go with Caleb Williams, but the one guy that I'm kind of like, when I put my head on the pillow, that maybe keeps me up at night, it would be Drake May.
I'll just say this about Drake May, and that's a fantastic point. Last week, we were at the pro days for Jaden Daniels, and the next day we were in Chapel Hill watching Drake May. And the downside to Drake May is that he looks like he's 12 years old in the face, but that's not his fault. He looks like a grown man in terms of being 6'4", 227 is what he weighed in at, gained a few pounds since the combine. But you make an important point, Coop, and one that I have to keep reminding myself, because there is some hero ball on Drake May's tape. But here's the thing. Drake May is 21 years old. He's played 2 years of college football. Prior to that, he was behind Sam Howell. Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr. have played a combined 15, maybe even 16 years of college football. They've been there for a while, and they've gotten a lot better. And I think that's important to keep in mind. I made this mistake with Justin Herbert a few years ago coming out. His final year at Oregon wasn't exactly what top 5 tape looked like. He ended up going after Tua. I think if you do the redraft, Justin Herbert has proven in terms of the measurables, he has the part and the arm strength, but he is also a winner. And in the right system, he can have a ton of success. And I think to your point, all these quarterbacks have to be in the right place. And if Drake May goes to New England with the Patriots, you hope that they surround him much better than they did with Mac Jones, which just seemed like they were trying to actively sabotage his career. But I think you have to be patient with Drake. You have to understand he's early on in his football journey. And just because you didn't see it play in and play out, to your point, you saw glimpses of it, and they were big boy glimpses, and those are things you can get excited about. But you have to understand these guys are going to get better. And in Drake's case, he's 2, even 3 years younger than some of the other guys he's in the same draft class with. And I just have to remind myself that, because I fell for that trap in Justin Herbert, and that's on me. I don't think I'm going to try to avoid doing it again in this case with Drake.
Yeah, 2 guys that both looked very young coming out of college, but can grow into the position and continue to get better. That's what you certainly hope. You draft for positional upside as well. Speaking of quarterbacks, so you do have another quarterback taken in the top 5, and that is J.J. McCarthy, but it is not the team that originally is selecting there in the Chargers. You have a mock trade alert here with the Vikings coming up to snatch him, or opposite. The Vikings are picking at 5. The Chargers coming up to snatch him. I obviously love the connection there with Jim Harbaugh. It seems like that just makes a lot of sense. But what factored into this mock trade for you?
I'm really interested to hear Coop's thoughts on J.J. McCarthy, because you watched J.J. play, and he wasn't asked to do a lot at Michigan. Not his fault. That team won the national title for a reason, in part because of J.J., in part because of the offensive line, the run game, and that lights-out defense. Here's the thing. When you go back and watch J.J.'s snaps, 3rd and 6 to 10 yards, he looks like an all-star, like a future Hall of Famer. He was absolutely lights out. He completed 72% of his passes in those situations, 5 touchdowns, no turnovers. He was even better under pressure in those situations, completing 75% of his throws and had 4 touchdowns and no turnovers. So he can do it when he's asked to. He just wasn't asked to do it a lot. Now, if I'm being honest with you, I think JJ, based on his body of work in college, is probably a late first rounder for me. But he has the athleticism. He has the arm strength. He has the size. We talked to him at the combine, and good luck finding someone more charismatic and who was a better leader than J.J. McCarthy, because after we spoke with him, I was like, okay, let's take him first overall. I was excited just to have the opportunity to speak with him. But I think the tape tells a different story than the Caleb and Jaden and even Drake May tape, and certainly Michael Penix Jr., who I think gets short shrift sometimes during the draft process, but I understand why teams fall in love with him. But the thing for me, Coop, is this. If you're the Vikings and you have picks 11 and 23, and you're probably going to have to give a 2025 first rounder to jump up to 5, you're essentially trading 2 first-round picks for the same type of player who's QB4 in this draft, as opposed to the 3 teams at the top who only use their first-round pick for a quarterback who they have graded even higher. So I think that's the danger you're in if you're Minnesota. Kevin O'Connell is great with young quarterbacks, and if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have anything. So I understand the urgency from Minnesota, but it feels like there's a lot stacked against the Vikings if they don't get this right.
Yeah, I do think there is a drop off, right? You look at the top of the draft, maybe Caleb Williams, he's in his own category. And then you look at Jaden Daniels, Drake May, and those are 2 guys with developmental upside that can get you excited. The JJ McCarthy is really interesting because it's funny. He's the guy that you would label a winner. I mean, he's the guy that busted the Ohio State notion over the last 3 years with Michigan. Obviously, Michigan winning the national championship. You go back all the way to his high school days at Illinois, then the IMG Academy. That's what this guy is. Now, people kind of reading into the hockey background as well. He is tough. He has all those intangibles. But Ryan said it. I mean, you talked about a complementary offense. This was one of the best offensive lines in college football over the last 3 years. You had a running game in Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards as well. When it was his time to step up, J.J. McCarthy did that. I think this is a guy you win with, not because of, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But out of all the fits, Ryan, I think with the quarterback position, this is the one that gets me the most excited. You think about J.J. McCarthy working with Kevin O'Connell. I think there's going to be some other teams out there. Like I'd keep an eye on Denver, Sean Payton, Las Vegas, and Antonio Pierce. They're all going to be looking for a young quarterback. And I certainly agree. I think in any year, these quarterbacks are going to be overvalued. And I'd have probably J.J. McCarthy anywhere from the 20 to 40 range, kind of depending on who you are. But because of those intangibles, because of the winning pedigree, and because of a sense of confidence and belief in some of these organizations, whether it be Minnesota and a young coach like Kevin O'Connell or Sean Payton, there's going to be a team willing to roll the dice, get a guy like J.J. McCarthy on a rookie contract and kind of see what that looks like. So I'm fascinated with this one. You know, I said this is the name that's kind of heating up with the last couple of weeks until the NFL draft. This is one that I think is the on-field fit and what he's going to be surrounded by is going to be incredibly important to his success. And obviously, we talked about environment with any young play caller, but especially J.J. McCarthy. I feel like that's kind of the story with him.
He was the 38th overall player coming out of high school. So fringe 5-star status is about what we expected him to land. But yeah, you're right. It's crazy to see what these quarterbacks go through during this draft process. Ryan, I know you track this on a daily basis, just the conversation surrounding them. Some of them get torn down through this process and some of them all of a sudden rise up. And that's what I feel like we're seeing here with J.J. McCarthy. Before him, at number 5, you do have Malik Neighbors going at number 4 to the Arizona Cardinals. In some of your earlier mocks, you had Marvin Harrison Jr. going number 2 overall, not the number 2 wide receiver, but you have him now as the number 2 wideout in this class. Why do you see him, Marvin Harrison Jr., now behind Malik Neighbors?
Emily, so in full disclosure, this mock draft came out right after I was at the LSU Pro Day, so I fell in love with the 42-inch vertical and the 4.35 40.
You and everybody else, though.
And everyone else. And I tell you this, if you've seen Malik Neighbors in person, you understand that he is thick. Like he is every bit 6 feet 200, and he plays much faster than Deebo Samuel, but he has that sort of dog in him after the catch. And Marvin Harrison Jr. is a special talent, and I have them rated the same. And I get the sense that the Cardinals are going to take Marvin Harrison Jr., but just to mix things up, I had Malik going here. It feels like one of those situations where you can't go wrong. If you're a team and looking for a wide receiver and you go Malik, who's more like Jamar Chase, who's now in Cincinnati and obviously played at LSU, or you go Marvin, who's more like a Larry Fitzgerald, who's a Hall of Famer, going to be a Hall of Famer very soon. And both guys are absolute game changers for you down the field in different ways. And I think if you're Kyler Murray, and Jonathan Gannon, the head coach, you're happy with either one. I think they probably lean toward Malik if the Cardinals were being honest with you. But Malik has done some truly special things, and he was so good that was one of the knocks against Jaden Daniels. Well, he's thrown to Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr., so how good is he really? I still think Jaden's pretty good. But in this mock draft, I have Malik going slightly ahead of him. And the other thing to keep in mind is that a few years ago, there were 6 receivers in the first round, and the 5th receiver taken was Justin Jefferson. Right after Jalen Reagor. So we don't know. That's the end of the story. At the end of the day, we don't really know. But based on what I've seen with my eyeballs, my brain tells me Malik and Marvin are both incredibly special players.
Yeah, I think it's more about Malik Neighbors than it is about Marvin Harrison Jr. And Malik Neighbors is one of those guys. I mean, you talk about run after catch, one of the most dynamic guys that we've seen in a really long time. And guess what? I was studying those quarterbacks. I was getting ready for the top of the board conversation, and I was watching Jaden Daniels, Heisman Trophy winner, and my eyes could not be taken off of Malik Neighbors. Just how explosive, how dynamic he is. I love the versatility. I really love his ability out of the slot. Anytime he gets lined up with the safety, it's an absolute mismatch. You turn on that Alabama game, really kind of get the true essence of who he is, what he's about. And I think Ryan said the most important thing is He's a dog. I mean, he's got that mentality, and especially with the ball in his hands, that's kind of what makes him different. You go back to his high school days, we recruited him at Oregon. He was a three-phase guy out of Louisiana, could do it all. And just in terms of the mentality, that's one thing that coaches have always raved about him. He's going to have an immediate impact. That's obviously what you expect in a top 5 pick, but I think he's going to be pretty special at the next level.
Another Belindikoff Award finalist, Rome Odunze. You have him going to the Jets at 10. Smoke Dixon did a similar show with us last week, and he joked that Aaron Rodgers is actually the one making this pick. I do think he would like this pick, but what do you like about that potential marriage in New York, Ryan?
Yeah, if Aaron Rodgers is making it might be Jermichael Finley. He might sign him out of retirement or something because he brings his guys back. But Rome Odunze, oh man, that's another guy who's special. So Cooper, I watched him over the summer. We did a little summer scouting thing, and he wasn't quite as twitchy as I want him to be. And this is no disrespect to either him or the name I'm about to say, I got some N'Keal Harry vibes, who was first round pick of the Patriots at Arizona State, in terms of being more of a big body who used his body to sort of shield defenders as he made catches. And then the 2023 season happened, and he was explosive. He was consistently stacking these defensive backs down the field, and he was one of Michael Penix Jr.'s favorite targets because every time he threw a contested catch, he came down with it. And it wasn't just the issue of him making contested catches. He was able to create separation down the field, and that's what I thought was the hugest leap for me based on what I saw over the 2022 season. I think he can win at all 3 levels. He can do it consistently. We know what kind of work ethic he has because we saw that at the combine. I think he was the last one to leave the stadium trying to get that 3-cone drill right in the 6/8, I believe is what he was aiming for, because he had done that during training. And when we spoke with him at the combine, he was incredibly humble. You never would have guessed that he was the prospect that he was. He just felt like a young man coming out of college applying for a job, which is sort of what he's doing. But I think the job he's going to have, if he ends up in New York with Aaron Rodgers, is helping elevate that offense opposite Garrett Wilson. And Garrett Wilson said at the end of the last season, we got to do things differently because this just isn't working. And I think the quickest way to solve that is if Rome Odunze is your running mate on the field there. So I love everything about him. I thought he had a fantastic season. I don't even know how he could have improved on it, especially after 2022. And then I think his next stop is probably top 10 pick.
Yeah, he's a great kid. We got to recruit him at Washington out of Bishop Gorman in Las Vegas, and he was a guy at one of the best programs in the country. He had back-to-back 1,000-yard receiving seasons as a junior and as a senior. We couldn't believe that he wasn't getting recruited harder. Now, we did eventually have to go through Lincoln Riley in Oklahoma to get that one done. But, this kid, 10.6, 700-meter coming out, we love the speed. We understood that there was a lot of developmental upside. And in terms of everything that you said, if you want to compare him to a guy like Malik Neighbors, they're very different. And I kind of thought about N'Keal Harry as well, because the thing about him, he is probably the best receiver in the draft. And quite honestly, one of the best that we've seen in quite some time when it comes to contested catches down the field. His ability to make that look easy, his balance, his body control, I also think his ball tracking ability as well. But if there is some concerns, I think it is going to be that short area separation, especially in the middle of the field. But outside the numbers, man, he's one of one. Love his ability. You talked about the competitive temperament as well, the humility that he kind of operates, and the maturity that he puts forth to the game. Day in and day out is unmatched. And you think about Kalen DeBoer, Michael Penix Jr., what they were able to do there. I mean, really a saving grace for Rome Odunze's career, as they were able to obviously put together one of the most explosive, dynamic offenses in the country this past year.
Yeah, you were part of the process of recruiting him to Washington when you worked in that department, so you cannot be held accountable for where he was rated with our scouting department, because as you said, you definitely thought very highly of him. Let's move on to the next round of picks. Let's go through 11 to 20, and that is where we're seeing some big guys come off the board, finally seeing some tackles go. We did see Joe Alt in the last group, number 7 to the Titans, but J.C. Latham here at 11 to the Chargers, Olufashanu at 14 to the Saints. It's not a rare thing to see the big guys and the tackles go early on in the draft, just the nature of the position. But explain to us, Ryan, how good is the top-end tackle talent in this draft?
It's better than last year's class at the top, and that's saying something because last year's class was pretty good. And the thing about this mock draft, I had J.C. Latham going 11th ahead of Olufashanu, and this is the reason why. The Chargers need a right tackle. They don't need a left tackle or a left guard. They have Zion Johnson. They have former first-round picks manning that that side of the field. On the right side, J.C. Latham is a natural right tackle. You could go with Tully Fuaga at Oregon State if you prefer him. I love both those players. But my offensive tackle one, Coop, incidentally, is Fashanu. I just had Joe Alt going number 7 to the Titans because it felt like he's technically further along in his journey right now, and he could start day one for a Titans team that desperately needs to make sure they protect Will Levis alongside Peter Skoronski's last year's first-round pick, where I think 2, 3, 4 years from now, if Fashanu, we could look back and say, oh, my God, this guy is an absolute game changer. He is incredibly athletic. I think his best football is ahead of him. He looks the part. People point to his 2023 tape not being as good as his 2022 tape. Here's the thing. We say this about quarterbacks all the time. He did it. He did it in 2022. He could have been pressing in 2023. Maybe he was injured. We don't know. There are myriad reasons why players don't play each play as well as their best play ever. And I think with Fashanu, the upside there with the athleticism and the smarts, and he is all about football. Those things really intrigue me. And if he's there at 14, I think the Saints have a gift fall into their lap. But by the end of the day, there could be 6, 7, 8 offensive linemen go off the board. One of my favorite guys from Oregon, incidentally, we had a chance to talk with him. One of the most engaging guys I've ever spoken with, Jackson Powers Johnson. I think he has an opportunity if he's available at 20, and he may not be there. He could go as high as 16 to the Seahawks. The Steelers will pull a hamstring sprinting to the podium to take this guy because they desperately need interior offensive line help, and the edge with which this man plays is a day one starter. And for the next decade, you don't have to worry about the center position.
I love this group. I love what you did with it, Ryan. Quite honestly, I mean, you go to the top of the board. I'm with you on Joe Alt. I mean, I think if you're looking for the safest option ready to play, I think that is Joe Alt. You think about his background, All-American at Notre Dame. Obviously, his dad played as well. I mean, this is a guy that's got a ton of experience, plug and play at the right tackle position. And then you think about J.C. Latham. I think he's got tackle guard versatility. Another freak from IMG Academy. I mean, you think about the guys they continue to put out every year at the offensive line position, now playing in the NFL. Maybe my favorite guy, Troy Fautanu, another guy at Washington. I loved him. And another guy out of Las Vegas, we thought eventually would be a guard. I think that's the conversation that's been following Troy Fautanu since he left high school, but he's got 34-inch arms. He's got a volleyball background. He's got great foot body quickness as well. He is nasty as hell. I love this kid. And you got him going off the board to Seattle. And I think the thing about that's a little bit of an eye-opener. He's got his former offensive coordinator and former offensive line coach there, Ryan Grubb and Scott Huff. So I think that's an ideal fit for a team that could either use him at tackle or guard. And then the Jackson Powers Johnson kid, you said it, so engaging, great personality, exactly what you want at the center position. And this guy, man, like if there was a definition of what a center should look like, and a guy that's probably going to play more than 10 years in the NFL and going to be a staple of your offensive line is Jackson Powers Johnson. But the last one here, Ryan, I got to hit on. I thought you nailed this. Amarius Mims, right? When you think about like a Jerry Jones pick, a guy that, when healthy has been dominant, but there are some lingering questions. You had him as a top 15 talent. He comes off the board in the 20s. They got to get that tackle position right. Obviously, they had some departures this offseason. You think about Amarius Mims, he kind of fits exactly what Jerry Jones has kind of been known to have an appetite for at the offensive tackle position. So I love that pick as well.
Hey, Emily, can I follow up real quick?
No. Yes, of course. Go ahead.
You might change your mind after I say what I have to say. So a couple things. Amarius Mims is such a freakish athlete. Like, it is insane to see someone that size move the way he does. And I've had him going 20 occasionally to the Steelers in some of these mock drafts. I think he's better than Broderick Jones coming out of Georgia in terms of the athleticism. We'll see where they are in terms of their journey. But if he's healthy, he can certainly go higher than this. And the other thing I'll mention is I love Troy Fautanu as well. And the volleyball background you mentioned, and I think you see some of that athleticism in his movements. I do a podcast over CBS Sports with Rick Spielman, the former Vikings general manager. He's a big Fautanu fan as well. But he's so old school, Coop, that the thing he can't get over with Fautanu is that he plays in shorts. Like he doesn't have his knee pads in. And Rick, has been in the NFL for 500 years. He's like, we need knee pads. I don't need to see your knees out there. You're not a wide receiver. I was like, Rick, just focus on the good part of it. But that's what gets him fired up about Troy. Never mind the level at which he plays football. But that versatility you talk about is also interesting. And I'm glad you made the Seahawks connection with his former college team, because that's also an important one as well.
Yeah, Coop talking about what the ideal center looks like. Apparently now when we're judging these guys, it's not just their football ability, but it's what they choose to wear too, or some certain things that can help you look the part. I just wanted to cut in and say that we've been talking for about half an hour and we have not mentioned a defensive player yet. So let's go ahead and change that. You've got Texas's Byron Murphy as the best defensive lineman in the class. I'll keep it simple. Why?
He might be, like, in terms of when my final big board comes out in a few weeks, he might be top 10. Like, he is another guy we talked to at the combine, and I asked him, as I often do, I said, who gave you the most trouble over the course of the last season in terms of offensive linemen you had to face? He goes, well, I'll be honest with you, no one gave me any trouble, but if you're going to pin me down, I'll say Cooper Beebe out of Kansas State, the guard there. And I thought that was both telling and correct. Very few people gave him trouble, even through the last game they played against Washington. The issue wasn't Byron Murphy, who went up against a really good Washington offensive line. The issue was the rest of that defense. He's only 292, quotation marks, because he plays next to Devondre Sweat, who's north of 360. But my goodness, the twitch with which he plays, the strength and power with which he plays, his calf muscles are bigger than my torso, and he is explosive. And I think he probably won't go top 10. And you touched on it, Emily. This class is so offensive heavy. There's going to be a run of offensive guys at the top, starting with these quarterbacks. But I think there's an opportunity if he goes 15, or where do the Rams pick? The Rams pick 19th. If he's there at 19, the Rams fell backwards into Aaron Donald 2.0. And I don't say that lightly. He probably won't be Aaron Donald because that's unfair to anyone. But it makes you feel a lot better about losing Aaron Donald if the consolation prize is Byron Murphy II.
I had a buddy works in the NFL, ironically, and Aaron Donald was a name that came up. I remember before the draft that Aaron Donald was in. He said, I think Aaron Donald's the best player in the draft, pound for pound. He slides back to the Rams. Now you're talking about Byron Murphy, and it seems like this is one of those positional value conversations. You know that this guy is one of the best players in the draft, but there's a certain range he has to fall into until you can pull the trigger. And I love Byron Murphy, and I'll tell you this. You just turn on that tape against Alabama, and you want to see a dominant player and a guy that was struggled to be blocked anywhere you put him on the field. It doesn't matter, one technique, three technique. And, you know, you mentioned it, just over 6 feet, 292 pounds. He had a 33-inch vertical. I think it was a high 4.7s, maybe low 4.8s as well. So explosive, dynamic athlete. You mentioned the twitch. You mentioned the power. What I love about him, once he gets in the backfield, he is a dynamic athlete. His ability to change direction, make plays out of his play radius as well is pretty special. I mean, you want to talk about just a dynamic player at the defensive tackle position. How often do you really say that? Maybe the most fun player that I've scouted so far in this draft. And I haven't scouted a lot of them, not as much as Ryan, I promise you that. But this guy, I could watch the tape all day.
Most fun player. Love to hear that. On the conversation of positional value, let's mention a tight end. We have made a lot of strides when it comes to the importance of tight ends. There's now a National Tight Ends Day. But when it comes to this guy, Brock Bowers, you have the Bengals actually getting a steal, what some may consider, at 18. So what went into your decision to have Bowers fall here?
Another top 10 player, but again, positional value is what it comes down to, right? And maybe if the Chargers stay put, don't trade out of that pick, maybe they consider someone like Brock Bowers. And one of the things that was most impressive for me, this Auburn game was incredibly impressive. If you watch one game to see who Brock Bowers is, this is it. They could not stop him. He even scored a rushing touchdown in this game. But his blocking got a lot better from 2022 to 2023. He had the ankle surgery and still came back and competed, wanted to help his team win, and that means a lot to teams when they're talking to these players. But Brock Bowers is all about football. I think Kirby Smart had a joke where, if you could get more than 2 words out of Brock Bowers, you win a prize. And we didn't get more than 2 words out of him when we spoke with him. He wasn't all about that, but he is all about football. And I think he is a special player. The issue is when you talk about tight ends, even the last 20 years, I think there have been 20 tight ends to go in the first round in the last 20 years. And you have the guys at the top, the TJ Hawkinsons, the Kyle Pitts, the Kellen Winslow Jr., and are they worth top 10 picks? Probably not. More likely than not, once you get to 19 to 32, that's where you get the value. Sam Laporta was a second-round pick last year and probably a top 3 tight end in the NFL. So that's the math that these teams are doing. But if you're sitting there and the Bengals have added some depth along the offensive line, so maybe they pass on an offensive lineman. Although, look, man, if it's between Brock Bowers and Amarius Mims, I'm leaning Amarius Mims. But if you get another weapon for Joe Burrow and it's Brock Bowers, that's a huge problem for the rest of the AFC.
Yeah, I love the fit here for Cincinnati. You think about Jamar Chase, obviously, T. Higgins out of there. But, I mean, think about Cincinnati, they were in this situation before, right? You had Jamar Chase or Penei Sewell. They went receiver to pair up with his old pal Joe Burrow, and it's not going to be to that degree. But if there is a guy like Amarius Mims on the board at 18, and you got Brock Bowers there, I just love Bowers. You go back all the way to high school, the pride of Napa High School in California, playing low A ball there in Cali. And this is a guy who was a three-phase player. He did everything. He played running back, he played tight end, and wildcat quarterback as well. They played him off the edge. There was some conversation. Is he going to be a 3-4 stand-up outside linebacker, just so dynamic, even offered a role in the return game as well on special teams. I love the way that this kid handles his business. He was a clean tester then. I know there's been some concerns about him not testing throughout the process, but over the last 3 years, what he's put on tape since he has stepped on campus in Athens, Georgia, in SEC, and one of the most competitive programs in the country, coming from Napa, California, showing that he's one of the best players pound for pound. I think that says something. And I think the other thing that you brought up with the tight ends, what I find fascinating, it's such a subjective feel, intuition, instinctive position. A lot of these guys that you're talking about, Kyle Pitts, Kellen Winslow, Vernon Davis, they're all really dynamic athletes. You can almost kind of put them in that receiver category. There's such a feel to this position. I think Brock Bowers has that, and I love his ability as a inline, what he can give you there as well. Obviously, kind of a little bit of a tweener frame, but the willingness, the physicality. I just don't think you can go wrong, especially if you're Cincinnati at 18. This is like a best player available dream for them if Brock Bowers or Amarius Mims are both on the board.
Almost seems like a luxury if you're able to take a chance and draft a tight end. But as you both laid out, it could be more than just your typical tight end. This is an absolute weapon. And yeah, the rest of the AFC should not be happy if he ends up falling to the Bengals here. Let's go ahead and show you a few more picks from Ryan's updated mock draft. You're looking at 21 through 26. We see a few more offensive linemen go here, another LSU wide receiver, and Brian Thomas Jr. We'll get to that in just a bit. But I want to start here with Cooper Petagna. I mean, he was recently cleared from the fractured fibula that he suffered back in November. He comes off the board for you at number 22 to the Eagles. What makes him stand out among this secondary group?
I mean, you look at those names, and again, it goes back to what I said at the top. This draft is so deep that even if you're sitting here in the 20s, you're not thinking about trading down. You're thinking about taking a player that will help you right away. The secondary in Philadelphia is aging, and they were exposed at times last year. Having Matt Patricia call plays after Sean Desai didn't work out, maybe that has something to do with it. I don't want to keep calling out Matt Patricia, but they have to get younger and more dynamic. And Cooper Petagna is both young and dynamic. Yeah, he had he broke his fibula late last season, but basketball standout. He obviously he's in the return game, and he is big. And so big, in fact, and he has ball skills, as you see there, that there's conversations about moving him to safety. And my pushback is, why would you move him to safety? He clearly can play on the outside. His physicality is what makes him special, and his speed. We see that there. We don't know how fast he is in terms of a time speed, but he certainly plays fast, both as a returner and his ability to cover down the field. And I think that's what I love about him. And if you do want to move him around, if you do want to put him in the slot or maybe have him patrol some safety spots for you, if you're the Eagles, maybe he provides that versatility. But first and foremost, he's a physical, big corner who can go up against big, physical NFL wide receivers, because a lot of times these corners come out of college, and Cooper, you know this, they're 178, they're 182, and they're pretty dominant in college. But when you go up against an A.J. Brown or a DK Metcalf, you got to think about hitting the weight room a little more often. I think Cooper is built with that 200 pounds coming in, and that's one less thing you have to worry about.
Yeah, I think the position flexibility is certainly something that stands out when you evaluate Cooper Petagna. I think having the ability to play corner, but ultimately at the end of the day, you talk to some teams at the NFL Combine, they love this guy kind of at the nickel spot. That's kind of the feel that I got. The closer that he is to the line of scrimmage, that's where they feel his best ball is played, more coming downhill as relative to maybe what that looks like playing with his back to the offense. So I like Cooper Petagna, everything that Ryan said about the positional flex, smart, heady, football instinctive defender, guy that can come up and run support, physical as well. I don't think you can go wrong here in terms of one of those guys you want to asterisk. That's going to be one of those guys that can impact your defense right away. I think Cooper Petagna is one of those guys.
All right, so you have Brian Thomas Jr. going at number 23 to the Chargers. He would be the third LSU offensive player to go in the first round. The last time that happened was the magical 2020 draft with Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mentioned that, though, Ryan, because it's kind of what you mentioned earlier in the show. You know, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Is it just the prolific quarterback and the Heisman Trophy winner, or is it these wide receivers? So how do you evaluate another impressive and historic LSU offense as far as how it translates to the NFL?
Yeah, and the thing is, Emily, he may not be here at this point. Brian Thomas Jr. may be long gone. He's another guy who, I mean, he had a 4.43 at the combine. He worked out at his pro day last week, and everything you saw on tape is what you saw there. He's long. He's a different type receiver than Malik. All they had him, it felt like all they had him doing, Cooper, during the season was running inside fades in the red zone and catching touchdown passes. He did that, it felt like 8 or 9 times, and all Jaden had to do was throw the ball up. And one of the thought experiments you could do, Emily, is say, okay, let's put Drake May on that LSU team with that offense. Instead of the lack of weapons he had while Des Walker was not available to play. And let's see what that looks like. And it probably looks a lot like what we saw with Jade Daniels. And those are the exercises you have to do to make sure that you're covering all your bases when you're trying to figure out where these players are going to end up being in 2, 3, 4 years as quarterbacks. But as wide receivers, they just keep getting better and better and better. It starts in the high schools, and Cooper, you know this better than I do. As these offenses evolve, they make their way to college and eventually to the NFL, and these players are the beneficiaries, especially at the skill position. And Brian Thomas Jr., the comp, it's not my comp, I'm going to steal it from my buddy Rick Spielman, is George Pickens. And I love that because he is that sort of explosive. George Pickens went in the second round because of he tore his ACL and he had some maturity issues. Brian Thomas Jr. is probably a top 15 pick. If he's there in the mid-20s, whichever team gets him, especially a team like the Bills now that are without Stephon Diggs, oh my gosh, they'll be doing cartwheels to land that guy.
I love that comp. I almost think he's a little bit more slippery. I think the thing with Brian Thomas Jr. is, this is a guy that's still really coming into his own. And when you think about that, I mean, he caught 17 touchdowns last year. I think that was an NCAA best, right? He was just a magnet for Jaden Daniels in that offense. Obviously, you had Malik Neighbors opposite of him, but you think about his size, over 200 pounds. You love the length, as you mentioned. You talked about low 4.4s. I love his verticality, what he brings to an offense in terms of being able to take the top off of a defense. You talk about the spit with Justin Herbert, having a guy like this with Brian Thomas Jr., in my opinion, who has a complete another level to his game that he hasn't reached yet. This is what makes him one of the most intriguing mid to late first round options, in my opinion, especially if you put him in the right offense. I think this guy's got another gear that he hadn't touched yet, and we got to see a little bit of that last year. But I don't think he has reached the top of his potential yet, which makes me really excited about his future.
All right, let's show you the last bit of picks here. Picks 27 through the final one at 32. So glad we have 32 picks again this year. Let's talk about Leto Latu. Is your pick for the Cardinals at number 27. Ryan, you described it on CBSSports.com as somehow he is still on the board. Why is he available here, and why do the Cardinals need to pounce if he is?
So medicals are going to be the thing with him. And so far, I haven't heard anything negatively about the medicals. He started his career in Washington. He was there with Puka Nacua and Trent McDuffie, I believe. I believe that's what he told us. And then made his way to UCLA. I believe he retired even briefly and then got the green light to resume his career. And find me a more technically sound edge rusher than Leto Latu in this draft class, and I will be completely and totally impressed because the first game of the season was Coastal Carolina, and that was teaching tape. The last game of the season, I believe, was the USC regular season game. And Caleb Williams, the fact that Caleb Williams is still alive is a testament to Caleb Williams' athleticism because Latu is a force. And if he were completely healthy and we weren't having conversations about the injury history, he would be just behind for me, Jared Verse and Dallas. Dallas, what's Dallas's last name?
Dallas Turner.
Thank you. Yes. Dallas Turner. That my brain is losing steam here. He would be right in the mix with those guys as potential top 15 picks. And this was just a function of there being a run on other positions, and he just continued to slip down the board. But he is a top 15 talent, and his tape is outstanding. He showed up at the Senior Bowl, unblockable the first 2 days of practice. He sat out the last day with a leg injury. He's fine. But there are very few things that I don't love about Latu, especially if the medicals come back all clear, because he is a special player who was coming off a truly special season.
Yeah, phenomenal human being. You think back, the medical retirement, it was kind of a strange time in Latu's career. Jimmy Lake takes over for Chris Peterson. Pretty dismissive there. Obviously, I've known that from my time at Washington. Medically retires, then joins Akaika Malloy, defensive line coach at UCLA, and has this resurgence in his career able to get his feet under him. And man, I would have liked to see a Braylon Trice, Leto Latu room there in Seattle, but that didn't end up happening. Ends up having a great career. And this is a guy that when we recruited him at Washington, national rugby background, and was a guy that was considering going to play professional rugby. Cal was in there, USC was in there. We had to overcome that. But you talk about it all the time. When people talk about Leto Latu, they talk about this maturity of the game. I love him. You talked about the technician, his ability to go speed to power. He can beat you a lot of different ways, but he's got really kind of a graceful initial quickness to him. Everything that he does, he's proactive. He has a game plan. I love Leto Latu. And if you're an Arizona Cardinals fan out there, and you see this mock draft, you got Malik Neighbors at number 4 and Latu at number 27. Go buy yourself a lottery ticket, turn it in, because it's the best case scenario if you're a Cardinals fan.
Yeah, Leto Latu was a top 100 player in the 2019 class, so somebody always has been on our radar. We'll see where he ends up falling. Ryan, do not worry. Only one more player we have to talk about. I'll give you his name. Mizzou cornerback, Inez Rakestraw Jr. He is your pick for the 49ers at 31. What has you confident that he is a first-round talent? Because you're not alone in this thinking, but some other mock drafts have him falling today too.
So you might look at the measurables and say, well, he's only 5'11" and 183. He plays here's who he reminds me of. He only ran 4.5, so he didn't run quite as fast as this guy, but this is who he reminds me of in terms of his demeanor on the field. Devin Witherspoon, who was a top 5 pick, I believe, for the Seahawks last year out of Illinois, who was an absolute firecracker, who played outside of Illinois. He played some inside last year for Seattle. He excelled at both because of his athleticism and his demeanor on the field, and that's exactly how Rakestraw plays. And there are millions of plays you could find on tape of him competing, and not only competing, but often winning the rep. And does he play undersized? No, he doesn't. He plays much bigger than that. And a lot of times when you're undersized, your concern is, okay, can he stay healthy? I have no issues with that. And I work with Bryant McFadden, who played at Florida State and played for the Steelers, won 2 Super Bowls. And his defensive back coach used to tell him, I'd rather say whoa than sick him. And with Inez Rakestraw, you got to say whoa, because he does not stop. And I love that about him. And a lot of times, Cooper, you see these cornerbacks in college that aren't asked to tackle a lot, and that doesn't translate to the next level, and they struggle. No such concerns with Rakestraw, who's coming in and looking to take somebody's head off from day one. He doesn't know he weighs 183. He thinks he weighs 210, and that's what I love about him.
Yeah, that Georgia game is everything you need to know about Rakestraw, just in terms of physicality. Definitely playing against the run. Got some love there on offensive lineman at Georgia, but you talked about those plays that you could pick out, right? Great energy with these players. You mentioned Puka Nacua earlier. That was one of those guys, like same deal, like just had great energy, infectious, the way they play the game, how they do one thing is how they do everything. It's kind of Inez Rakestraw to me. The one play that really kind of stood out that I was watching this morning, he gets beat off the line of scrimmage against Florida, against Ricky Pearsall, another guy probably going to be a top 64 draft pick. And you talked about his speed time, right? The verified time there. He clocked a 4.51. His ability to come back, make that play, chase him down the field is kind of everything that you need to know about him. So him in the nickel position, I like him a lot. You talked about the position versatility a little bit. And then you also have talked to some people around Inez Rakestraw who've gotten the opportunity to kind of see him work out as he prepares for the NFL draft. Just nothing but glowing remarks about the type of competitor that he is. So love the value there into the draft. I think 49ers, they do a great job. Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, I think it'd be a great fit.
Love it. Ryan, you said there's one more mock draft after this?
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Okay. I just jinxed it. I'm sorry.
One more after this.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing the second to last one with us. And thank you, Coop, for all the great breakdowns. We appreciate both of you. If you want more content from both of them, First with the First Pick podcast is the podcast you should be listening to with Ryan and former NFL GM Rick Spielman. They get you ready to go for the upcoming NFL draft. And I will say this is not just during draft season. You can listen to these guys all year long. And if you want a nice look into the future, make sure you are listening to the 247 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast with Cooper Petagna and Andrew Ivins. New episodes are live every Tuesday and Wednesday right here on the 247 Sports YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.